La, 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 la. Right. So this is going to be fun because I'm starting now. We've got a sponsor since you've been on. You were number 3, I think, the third guest, and in my opinion, one of the people that helped give us some credibility on this thing. It's like, holy crap, you got Eddie Brill on right away, and it's like, yeah, but we've got one sponsor. We're saving ourselves from the other pressures of or opportunities of sponsorship. I'm not going to do dick pills or mattresses or anything like that. I'm not going to do any of those.
Well, they would go together, dick pills and mattresses.
Well, they do. And
yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Purple and Blue Chew or whatever the companies are, whatever they are, they should link up. We're not doing that because we want to get deputized. We want to be the official Letterman podcast, and we want that to happen. So we're not going to do any sponsorship stuff. We made that decision, but there is one. We do have one sponsor. It's going to be fun to have you on here because the Letterman podcast is brought to you in part by the Hello Deli. Rupert G and the Hello Deli. Our only sponsor. If you want Late Show with David Letterman merchandise, guess what? You can still get it at hello-deli.com. Rupert will pack it himself. T-shirts. I got one here. Look at this. I know me and Eddie are big hockey fans, and hockey season's about to start, so I wore my Kings jersey. But you want a Late Show with David Letterman shirt? There it is. You want you want a mug? You broke your mug? Hey, Rupert's still got them. Go to hello-deli.com.
Does he have those double-ended pencils?
He doesn't.
Well, I'm saying, does Rupert sell those?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't have them anymore. But we're gonna, as this thing starts to roll, we've got a lot of ideas, and I look at some of the jackets from back in the day. There's some patches on them that would make really cool T-shirts and things like that. There's some really good ideas that we have, and as this thing rolls, and if it starts getting bigger, we want to start pitching some of these ideas. But I mean, how many times have you eaten something or walked through the doors of the Hello Deli in your life? It must be so many times.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it just to see Rupert and May, the two of them. It's, I mean, they were friends. So, and even after the show was over and it was Colbert, I, of course, went to see some of the production crew from CBS stayed on because they were working for CBS. So I visited the studio, see some people, and I stopped by Hello Deli. I mean, they're very good people and our friends. And I don't know, I was there for 17 years, I guess 17 years worth of popping in and saying hello. And a couple of times I was very sick, and there was a 14-year period where I didn't have one day off, and that was I would go on whether I was sick, had the flu, laryngitis, whatever, and they would make me a special drink to soothe my throat. They put herb, they had all this stuff, and they were, I mean, they were, it was family, like you said, and they took very good care of me. And then like halfway through the show, they get me another one of these elixirs, with all kinds of natural herbs and honey and stuff like that. So yeah, no, I love them. I spent a lot of time there with them, even if I didn't go in to eat or whatever.
Yeah. I appreciate that so much, and so many of the guests have had little anecdotes here and there about Rupert and his business partner May, and we've had Rupert's girlfriend Irene on a couple times already on this show. She's a big, they've graciously invited me into this family, and that's what it was. I have a theory that I think on many days in New York City that there aren't people who take more selfies with strangers than Rupert G. I mean, it's like God took the word kind and turned it into a man. He's so sweet and so kind, and I love my friendship with him, and it's so cool to say that we're kind of in a little partnership here. I love that so much.
That's very, very nice.
Eddie Brill is back, everybody. We are at a place in the Letterman podcast now where I love this part because we've done the initial interview with some of these folks, Eddie, number 3, and now we're just back to kind of shoot the shit a little bit. I love
What are we doing now? I'm number 4 as well.
No, yeah, that's right. Number 3 and number 4. So still getting the credibility. Lots of good things happening. I think by the time this comes out, it'll be number 27, 28. We just had Steve Young back to do Bathtubs Over Broadway. That'll be out for his second episode. That was really, really good. And just, yeah, a lot of fun stuff. It's a good time to be a Letterman fan. We talk about that. Eddie, I'll tell you this, the number one question that I had of people almost borderline frustrated after our first episode was that I didn't ask you about stories about you going to the desk. Because I mean, so many times watching that show, we would see like during the commercial break where it would come back for a second, Alan Coulter might say something funny or whatever, and it would show the desk or show the crowd, but then it would show like Bill Sheft and you at the desk talking with Dave, or so many times. And I mean, really unique perspective, because you must have done that thousands of times over your career.
You know,
early on, you guys would talk about?
Early on, there were a couple of people. I went to Emerson College in Boston, and it was a school that eventually produced a ton of comedians and also incredible stars, like way back, like Norman Lear and Bill Dana, and then after that, Jay Leno and Henry Winkler, and then the next one was like Andrea Martin and that group, and then it was our group with Stephen Wright and Dennis Leary and Mario Cantone and Lauren Dombrowski, and then after us, it was Bill Burr and David Cross. And, so it was a really cool place. And you'd run into people in the industry all the time. I got my first warm-up gig for Saved by the Bell from one of the guys who was when I was living in LA for a short time, who went to Emerson, was one of our friends, and he was the producer over there. And so, we always hook up. So there's a guy, Mike Goldsmith, who was the one of the camera tech guys on the stage. He was, from my freshman class. Our freshman year, we lived next door to each other. He worked there, but Dave's assistant, Lori Diamond, had gone to Emerson, and that brought us together, and she and I became very close, and she was very good to me and made it really nice, and a nice, comfortable, I guess, in a way. I don't know what went on behind the scenes, but she obviously said nice things. And she said, "Come with me to the desk in the commercial break." And that was very early on. It was maybe a year and a half in, and then I was every night.
So hold on. So you were there a year and a half as the warm up before this is before you're the booker, and it was about a year and a half before the first time you came to the desk.
I'm trying to think of when it was. It was the 5th anniversary at CBS.
Okay.
Around that time, the 5th anniversary of CBS.
98, yeah. That'd have been a year and a half.
98.
Yeah, you showed up in 96, right?
I started in 97.
Yeah. Oh, 97. Okay. So there you go. Wow. So Lori said, "Hey, come on over."
It was about a year, and then I was there every night, and we, it was fun and nice, and we talk about a million different things, either the show and what maybe ideas for what to do in the next segment.
Yeah.
I remember there was one time there was this thing with this ping pong guy who was on the show playing ping pong, and they kept adding him to things, and I would come up with ideas for that at the desk. And also there was a lot of times when Dave would go out to the audience, and he was looking for the kind of jokes where it was like, my cousin's in town from Ohio, and Dave would say to Stephanie, "Dayton," and she'd go, "No, it's my cousin." Like those corny jokes. So I would write a ton of them and then give it to Dave to use out in the audience. And then there was a time when Bill Sheft left the show, and he was writing a book and doing other things, and so it was just me and Dave at the desk in all the commercial breaks. So that was even cooler, and got to hang out and of course go to hockey games and things like that. But we it was really nice. And then when Dave got sick, all of the guests who, like Elvis Costello and all those people who were on the show, I'd come up to the desk and just, try to be a calming influence, and, sense if they're want me to be up there, if they're too nervous or whatever. And also at the same time, let them know they're doing well. I mean, it was crazy dream come true-ish stuff. And we talk about the Beatles, or we talk about, what will happen in a sporting event the night before. I mean, it was never consistent, but it was just a nice group, me, Bill, and Dave, talking in the commercial breaks. And there are little skits that are in there with me and Dave and Bill are eating ribs, and they showed it, and they said, "Paul, did you get to try those ribs?" And Paul's playing. No, we're playing. And that's the other thing. Dave would say, "Hey, what music do you want to hear right now? You think of a song," and he'd say, "Runaway" by Del Shannon or something, and I'd go over to Paul and hand him a note and said Dave would like to, Del Shannon, Runaway, and then we come back for the next commercial break, and Paul, and the band, who were amazing and funny and great, they'd play the song. So there was all that kind of stuff going on at the desk, and I was so proud, just to be up there. I mean, to hear what was going on and to see all the stuff, and again, to be up at the desk, and like that's how I met Paul McCartney. I went up to the desk, and Dave actually for a minute or two got up and walked over to, I think, Gaines or somebody, and started talking, and so I'm at the desk with Paul McCartney, all
Paul's
alone.
just sitting there.
Yeah, and so we had an incredible conversation, and talked about Michael Jackson recently dying, and the night before I had told Dave, he said, he of course has a big staff of writers, and he said to me, and I think it was Chef was there during that time, and said, any stories that you think I should ask Paul? And I said, the first thing I thought about when Michael Jackson died, which was literally a week or two before, what's going to happen to the Beatles music,
the publishing.
Yeah. So Dave was ready for that the next day, and it actually became a question at the show. So it was really nice to sometimes say so, or like I tell him a joke, like I remember telling him this joke that I remember from Laughing, and it was Ruth Buzzy and Artie, what's his last name? I forgot, his Artie Johnson.
Okay.
And he's like a little old man, and she's a little old lady, and she goes, "Would you care to dance?" And he goes, "I'm a little stiff from bowling." And she goes, "I don't care where you're from. Will you care to dance?" So Dave laughed out loud and came back from the commercial break, and he did that joke on the air, and it made me proud. Or sometimes I just say something and he'd laugh, and then come back from the commercial break. Eddie said he'd tell the that I'd said my name and everything, and it just was so nice. That
what a kick. What a
you
kick.
can make that guy laugh, the guy who you adored and worshipped.
Yeah. I want to go back to the Paul thing for a second here, because I mean, since the last time you were on, there's been all sorts of stuff that have come out. I've actually mentioned you a couple of times on a couple episodes. We talked about Rupert's girlfriend Irene. One of the things, she had been to the show. I think it was something like, this is before they were together, and a little bit maybe after, but like it was like 40 something times. So she saw you a lot. She talked about how she sat with your parents one time, beside your parents one time, and stuff. But one of her favorite memories is of you warm up, and Paul and the band would play Sly and the Family Stone, Dance to the Music a lot, and you would come in with the bass part and sing along with it. And
I do for Will Lee was so generous, and we became great friends. It was just his birthday the other day, but this will be out of place. But he gave me the 4 measures to go. Will's gonna add some bottom so that the dance rhythm just won't, and to be able to sing on that stage with that band every night.
Yeah, that's just it. Like, and then when we had was it Bones? No, you know who it was? It was Steve O'Donnell. Steve O'Donnell told us that Paul would hear about certain artists that might be going through hard times sometimes, and they would intentionally take some of their music and put it into the show to get that group a small paycheck or
wonderful,
to help them.
I wouldn't doubt it in a second. Paul, like Dave, very generous, incredibly generous, and caring, and looking out for musicians, and comedians do that for each other as well. And but Paul, they were very generous people, and it's like, if it's like anything, it starts at the top and filters down, and you work for Dave, and the integrity and the generosity and the goofiness and all that kind of stuff. It's all part of it. Excuse me for burping.
No. It's a culture that was built. And I mean, I've got a whole bunch of, first off, there's a bunch of things for folks who were in Dave and company's family. for an extended period of time, or even folks who were there, a few years, there are certain things that have filtered down and traits that make it recognizable. Number one is the loyalty you all had for each other, and still to this day have, which is amazing. Just the respect, and I mean, it is a family, of course, things happen in a family, but don't mess with the family, because you're all the loyalty that's there. Second, oh my God, we've used a lot of Godfather analogies on this thing.
Have you seen the show about the Godfather on Peacock?
I'm saving it. I'm waiting for that next season to come out. I'm waiting for it like a present.
It's called The Offer.
Yeah, The Offer.
10 episodes, and it is spectacular.
Yes, I've heard.
Yeah,
I cannot wait. It's literally a present waiting for me to be unwrapped.
But there's no other seasons. There's just one season of 10 episodes, and that's it.
Oh, they're not going to do another. Oh, I had thought another one might be coming, so I was going to.
No, this is just the story of the making of the Godfather.
Yeah.
That's ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I had thought
I was able to tell you that, so you don't wait a year.
Well, that's just it. I want to stay away from the spoilers as much as I can, but I thought that they were doing another one that had to do with one of the sequels or something like that. I thought that there was a coda coming, but no, if I'm wrong on that, then I'm
some other group. But this one was a 10 episode thing.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch.
And by the way, I don't, my hockey stuff is put away, and I've of course gained 1 million pounds since then. But I found this to show you, this hockey jersey I got. I don't know if you could see it.
Oh, but, man. Tell me the story behind this thing.
Well, when we perform at the Cam Neely benefits in Boston, that Dennis Leary hosted all the time, they would give us jerseys, and we got a brick from the Boston Garden, every one of us, because they, the Boston Garden was gone, and they gave us each a brick. And this one doesn't have it, but you usually get your name put on the jersey. And they had all kinds of cool jerseys, but this was my favorite. Comics Come Home. Let's see. I'm trying to see it there.
I want to talk about your social media presence, and how you are, in my opinion, a philosopher in the posts that you write. You're such a beautiful writer, and whatnot. You wrote a post recently about that event. I want to talk about that event. How many years did it go on? It wasn't just a one-time deal. It's still going on.
And the talent, like I think this year they had Roy Wood Jr. I don't know if it's happened. I think it might be like in another week or something, but it's Roy Wood Jr. and Jimmy Fallon, and there's a ton of people on it. Sam J. I can't remember. I saw the list, but I don't remember. There's always Lenny Clark and Adam Ferrara are always on. But it's been going on for 1 million years, since the 90s.
Yeah. Well, Cam Neely is okay. So I'm a gigantic Kings fan, but again, not famously, infamously, perhaps, from Western Canada. Everybody around me are Vancouver Canuck fans. Like my whole life
the
surrounded
worst trade that Vancouver ever made.
There you go.
Yeah.
So Cam Neely, there's a special place in the heart of almost everybody around me for Cam Neely, because he started as a Canuck. The fan base was incensed when he was traded to the Bruins, but they still have this loyalty all these years later. They've got this loyalty for Cam, and I mean, you talk about what as Kevin Smith would say, what a big bucket of win that guy's had within the Bruins organization, and the roots he has built out there.
Right.
There's a classic guy, Cam Neely, right there.
He's a tremendous guy, in that sort of Paul Schaefer, Letterman person who does charity work. And Cam and his brother, I think his name's Steven. I don't know why I can't remember his name, but it might be Steven. They put this benefit together, and Dennis is a big hockey player, not Dennis Leary, and Cam and him met, and this whole idea came about, and it just gets bigger and bigger every year, and it's good. I think 4 of them or whatever, but there's been a ton of them. And I did the first 2 years. It was really fun. I saw some photos recently of the first year, and Chappelle and Jon Stewart, and and everyone's so young and fresh faced.
Has Burr done it? I mean, he must have. Burr must have done it.
I'm sure he has.
I'm sure he has. Like that that event screams Bill Burr to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a lot of Boston guys, like
Yeah.
Tony B and Nick DiPaolo and those kind of people, and then big stars like like I had said, Jimmy Fallon and those people would come by, and Roy Wood Jr., who was on the Daily Show, is one of my great friends and I think one of the best comics around, and just smart and terrific, and it's raises a ton of money. It went from being at the Orpheum, which is a pretty big theater in Boston, to
and legendary as well. A lot of sentimentality with the Orpheum.
Yes, and now it's at the Jiva. It went to the Jiva Hockey Arena, which was where there was college hockey being played, and then it got even bigger, and now it's at the Boston Garden.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
To bring it back to Letterman on that regard, I love what Walter is doing. And Don, of course, all hail the Dons in the background as well, and showing these moments of amazing history, and the fact that Dave went quiet after Late Show ended, but now we're looking back and going, oh, hey, look at these very first television network appearances by some of these artists like Lizzo or some other ones, but then comics, like going back and showing some of these comics, like David Attell. Oh my God, him putting up that clip, and Chappelle, of course, and so many comics got their start, and now look at these legends. I love seeing that stuff. You must love seeing that stuff too. You booked some of that stuff, so you must just love the history now that you are a part of.
Yeah, well, I love all that stuff, and I've been through it, so it has great memories. But I love what Don does when he puts together like a video series of, like, say someone passes away, or not, like Michael Keaton, who's a brilliant actor. Don put this thing together of all the Michael Keaton appearances, and Dave and Michael, they're both stand-up comics and knew each other at the Comedy Store and all that. And it was really fun to see Michael Keaton's career grow through these clips, and to see the laughter that, Dave had, especially the very first time. You could just see Dave enjoying the hell out of it, and then you knew that this guy was coming back often. I mean, there's a lot of little things, but the work those guys do are terrific, and it's really fun to watch. I recently it was the 25th anniversary of my very first appearance on Letterman. Recently, it was September 1st, 1997 was my first spot. So here we are in just a week ago. It was my 25th anniversary of the first time I did the show. And I've gotten bumped a lot because even though I was scheduled, I, worked there. So like if one guest went over and they're like, we're going to keep this guest on, we'll put you on next week or whatever,
it's the easiest thing in the world at that point.
For them. Yeah. Not for the comedian. Like, you work and you prepare and you tell your friends and your family.
Yeah.
But eventually I learned better not to tell anyone until I was sure it was going to be.
Oh, that's smart. We just had Casey St. Ong on, and that was a really, really good episode. She talked about how I asked about the Prince story, the infamous Prince story, and I think that probably was just before your time, but
it was.
But there's rumors about the story, and she dispelled, and she said it from her standpoint, and the rumor was when Prince left, there was anger and all that, and she said, oh no, the only frustration was now we're short. And it's so funny how the little things are the things that are the frustrating. Oh, we're really long on this, we're really short on this. Having you as the guy that they could massage the time with is very convenient for them, obviously inconvenient for you, but it's
it only happened once where they said that somebody's I think it was Eli Manning was coming back from Denver from the Super Bowl, and it was bad weather, and they said, put a set together, we need you to go out there. It only happened once, but I had a lot of people I prepare. Brian Kiley, I don't know if you know who he is. Brian Kiley grew up with Conan O'Brien, and he was the head monologue writer for Conan up and all through the years, and a brilliant writer and one of Dave's favorite comedians, and a brilliant comedian, and I would have sets worked out with him because he was working at Conan down the street. So Brian would have a suit and tie ready hanging in his office, and I go, Brian, get over here. And we'd work out the set already and get it approved by standards and practices and the producers, and
Yep.
we have all the paperwork ready to go. And they, because, like, I'll give you an example. The night that Dave didn't come because he had was sick.
Yep.
Bruce Willis ended up hosting the show. Now, Bruce Willis was one of the guests on the show.
Yeah.
He ended up hosting it, and they called me and said, get a comedian, and I had to get Brian Kiley did the show, and and the cool thing for Brian Kiley was that he'd be on television, and he loved the Letterman show, since the NBC days.
Yeah.
And and it was a very nice paycheck. It wasn't ridiculous, but it was a network paycheck.
Worth his time. Yep.
Yeah. And if for some reason they filled the time and didn't need the comedian, Brian would still get a paycheck for showing up, which was
trouble.
Very, 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 very nice. But Brian, told me years later, he said, I would be there and I'd be so nervous because am I going to make the cut? Am I not going to make the cut? There's a lot of anxiety there. And I know it's, a lot of times that happened to me many times where they said, Eddie, you're on the bus, we're okay. We don't need you tonight. I'm like, okay.
I love this very, very much from a nostalgic standpoint because it is something that wasn't intentional, but it was an evolutionary similarity from Johnny. I mean, we've had Dreesen on, we've had Altman on. They talk about, being bumped on Johnny. Dave was, bumped, I believe, on Johnny once or twice as well. And the idea, or maybe Dave wasn't. Maybe that's what it was. I'm remembering it wrong. But I know Tom certainly.
I don't know that story. If
Tom certainly was
or not.
But the idea,
they hated bumping the comedians. They hated it.
Yeah.
But you get 44 minutes, and they don't say, well, here's another 5.
That's right.
That's what you get.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's funny how I love it. It's almost like in the big time show business, the greatest, this in my opinion, the greatest show on TV went from the Tonight Show to the Late Show, especially when it came to comedians. And one of the things is you don't want to bump them, but it's that double-edged sword of it being the greatest opportunity that a comedian could ever have. But at the end of the day, your placement is near the end of the show. You could get bumped and it could be 3 or 4 months before you actually get your opportunity on the show. No, and there's a special kind of nervousness with that.
Right. But it never was 3 or 4 months. It would be a lot quicker turnaround because you try to get the person on, you're preparing your set, you're all ready to go. And, it would be, hopefully later that week or, the following week or whatever, always try to not, think for the community because it would suck. Things happen and you adjust it, but no one had to wait 3 or 4 months.
Okay. That's very cool to know. Because this is where we're getting into you're wearing your booking hat now. And another criticism I took from our first episode, I didn't ask you this, and it's I love this question. I wish it was my question. Did you ever have any conversations with Jim McCauley?
Yeah, I knew him. I met him in Montreal during the comedy festival.
Okay.
And so he had, was just done, the Johnny Carson with Johnny, and they were done.
Yeah.
And I don't know if McCauley was saying this just because it was easy and he couldn't wriggle out of it if it wasn't true, or it was true. He said, Eddie, seeing your comedy tonight, I can't believe that I never saw it before because I would have had you on the show with Johnny a bunch of times.
Oh my God, really?
Chance. Yeah. So like that could be bullshit, and he could just be saying that because he was very nice to me. He was very friendly.
It's a very nice thing to say. It's a beautiful sentiment either way.
Right. Yeah, I mean, but yeah, who knows? You never know. People say things because they have to. Or not. That's not a situation where you have to. But anyway, he was very nice to me, and I met his son, and and he wasn't long for the earth after I had met him. But he was he was very nice to me, and we talk about comedians, and it was kind of fun, and that was a compliment. But I never got on the Tonight Show with Johnny, and it was also at the same time it was kind of like, too bad, I would have loved to have done that show.
The way that The Godfather has come up on this show a few times, almost to some people's annoyance, but I still will say it. I look at Johnny as Don Vito, and I look at Dave as Michael, and it's the next phase of things.
Yes.
Now when you met Macaulay, and for those who are catching up, that's Johnny Carson's gatekeeper in many respects, the guy who would be down at the Comedy Store, the guy who would be nurturing and massaging these different acts to get them on Johnny's Tonight Show, and for the first time, comic could make a career out of it.
Yeah, that was the difference. That was the difference between Letterman and Johnny. Okay. I mean, Letterman made some, their first, Ray Romano and Jim Gaffigan, just two examples.
Chappelle.
But when they made their network television debut, they would make it, if they made it on Letterman, it was also Jon Stewart was on, and Conan was not Conan, but there was a whole bunch when I was there in CBS. Letterman wasn't the only game in town on television, and there was cable TV and there was network television going on.
Sure.
So you could have a career out of your spot, but it wasn't like when Johnny Carson and Dave and I had talked about this. There were no choices in the Johnny Carson days. You watched the Johnny Carson show, or you were asleep somewhere. But that was it. So if you did the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson as a young comedian, and Johnny would always say, I'm glad you guys are in a good mood. That was his thing that Johnny would say always when he had a comedian on, because I'm bringing on a comedian making his first appearance. And then you had, 25 million people watching you, where in the Dave days, there was 5 million people watching, I think, and it's great. Yep. It's amazing, and it's a dream come true, and to be considered one of Dave's comics kind of thing is another thing. But it wasn't the same exposure. And also people with VCRs and people with, after VCRs, then what do you call them? The cable boxes.
The DVR,
DVR, that's the letters I was looking for. And oh my God. And so there was ways you didn't watch with Johnny. If you didn't watch it at 11:30 at night, you missed it.
Yep.
There were very few reruns, and when there were reruns, it's barely. It wouldn't be back on again. It wasn't like that.
Well, yeah, but it was a different time too, where you also had 60 or 70 phone numbers in your head memorized. And the folks who, back then, it translates over to, because if you watch Johnny and you saw a comic and then you saw that comic was coming to town or something like that, that's one of those things that was just like the phone numbers. You remembered that because these things weren't there and we had different skills in our minds. You said something there that was amazing. I want to go back to Jim Macaulay for 1 second, because when you met him, were you the booker at that point?
I think I was. I'm trying to remember. It was, I'm pretty sure I was, but I was there mostly as a booker and a comedian. I was there working as a stand-up, and also, I was able to look at comics, and it was interesting because the Montreal Comedy Festival, very incredible festival.
Just for Laughs is gigantic. Yep.
Yeah, it's a huge event, and the people who run it are, Bruce Hills and all these people. They're just amazing at what they do. But I didn't find many comedians there, because they didn't book a lot of, stand-ups in the sort of stand-up vein. They booked a lot of personalities. Like, if you do well at the Montreal Comedy Festival, you're going to get a sitcom because you're an actor, or you do impressions, or you do this. And I remember one year being there, and out of the nearly 800 comedians I saw, Roy Wood Jr. and Tommy Johnigan were the only two comics that were at the whole festival, were the kind of comics that we would put on the Late Show with David Letterman, because they were both great writers and great, it's a smart and silly combination. So, I didn't always find a lot of great comedians in Montreal. The way I found great comedians is other great comedians said, hey, I worked with this guy or this girl in, some club somewhere, and you got to check them out. And
they would fit your sensibility of what you're looking for.
Right. Plus, like, say I did, I worked a lot of comedy clubs. I mean, almost every weekend, and I'd fly to some city. So say I'm in Denver, And the first few nights, it would just be the show that I was on. And then always the last night, the club owner would put on 10 local comedians for me to watch.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
I would close the show, but I would watch, they would have like 10 comics on doing 5 to 7 minutes before.
Yeah.
And then I'd take notes, and if these comedians wanted any of the notes that I had, we'd go over there. But the comedians didn't want to hear my notes. They wanted to hear, you got the show. That's all they cared about.
But that's interesting. This is the part where I'm fascinated about Macaulay, because you talk about Johnny to Dave. In many respects, Macaulay to Eddie Brill, and similarities.
No, Zoe Friedman is a big a big conduit that you've missed there. Zoe,
without a doubt.
Ray Romano and Jim Gaffigan.
Yep.
She found a lot of great comedians, and she was following me, and eventually I got on the show, but I was already working there. But before I was working there, she was working with me. I also what's his face, Bob, what's the producer of the show,
Robert Morton.
Thank
Morty?
you. Yeah, Morty.
Yeah, you were trying to call him Bob when you were looking for Morty, is what it was.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's the problem. But he was the booker. I remember him coming to see me at Catch a Rising Star and way back in the day.
Yeah.
So so there were other people. It didn't go
no, and I'm not saying it went in that order, but I am saying that it was that role to that role. And the question was gonna be, and we can actually throw Zoe into this as well. Did Jim or Zoe give you any advice when you took over that role? Like when you met Jim, if you were in that role at all, was there any kind of sage advice? Hey, watch out for this or watch out for that. Because I mean, you see comics that, like Chappelle is a good example of this, where it's like, okay, you go to see them in the club, and their act is significantly more blue than what would be necessary if they were going to show up on your guys' stage. But were you able to kind of discern through that and say, yes, they have a hunk that is clean, that is perfect exactly for our sensibility? Like, was there any advice that the Macaulay or Zoe gave you when you took that role? And
not that I remember. Not that I remember. I mean, I watched what they did and paid close attention and understood. And when it's interesting when you say the comic was blue, and that cursing is lazy. It's not. It can be funny if that's your character, but any comic who cursed on stage, you could put them on television. You don't have to curse on the thing. Blue didn't mean edgy. Blue. We had edgy comedians on the show, like
absolutely,
and Nick Apollo.
Yep.
And they were Jim Norton. Like what people say are edgy, but they're brilliant comedians who were smart and funny, and that's all that matters. So, like, if you have a set to do on a comedy club, 45 minutes to an hour, if you can't find 4.5 minutes of stuff that you could do on television, I mean, like, for instance, I had one joke where it was very innocuous about the weather, and I used the word prick, and they said you can't use the word prick on or television. I was like, why? They did it on NYPD Blue. I said, where late night, they go, you can't. So I changed the word to jerk. Yeah. And it got this, and it still had that K sound, that magical comedy K sound.
Automatically, it still worked.
It worked like a charm. Yeah. And so, there's certain things, and I remember there was I had a joke that was, comedians loved it, and it was wordplay, and it was like adding insult to injury, and what would that mean? And I'd look and I go, hey, cripple, nice tie. It would be right. So that was that joke, but I couldn't say cripple on Letterman because, first of all, he wouldn't allow that, obviously. Yeah. And so I said, hey, you with the crutches, nice tie, and it still got a big laugh, like big laugh, not as big as the other one. But but look at it. Richard Pryor was on, the Ed Sullivan Show.
Great example.
Richard Pryor was on the Tom Jones Show and was provocative. And it's not about language; it's about intention. And the comics that we would put on Letterman had the qualities mostly of smart and silly. Jake Johansson and Brian Regan, Caroline Ray. Those are the kind of comedians we had on the show. They were smart and silly. And there are a lot of incredible comedians, that were just not right for the show. And it was hard for me because there are thousands of comedians in, say, 15 spots, and
Yes.
12 of those spots are comics that are on every year. There
Yeah.
wasn't always. There was one year where I had 7 new comics on the show, that had all making their network television debut.
Yeah.
But then again, there was a million shows. So like, I was working with Hannibal Buress really hard to get him on the show. Not only did I work with him as a comedian, but I used to sit him in the green room at Letterman. I said, I want you to get comfortable here so that when you come to the show, that you already know what it's like to be backstage. And then, we didn't get tickets for the show, but every once in a while, a comedian would be on the show and they'd get the 4 tickets that a guest would get. And they were only using 2 of them or 3 of them. I would ask that comedian, do you mind if I give a young comedian your extra tickets so that they can be in the audience, so they can see what it looks like, see the spot where you stand. So I got Hannibal Buress oftentimes. So, he ended up doing another show. I think the Fallon show before he did ours. And I was like, well, I was grooming you to be network debut at our show. And he goes, no, they asked me and I did it. You want them to do that. But, Hannibal does Letterman, and Letterman loved him, and Hannibal crushed. And, obviously he's a great comedian, but I spent a lot of time, quote unquote, grooming him so that he would be comfortable. And he was, it doesn't mean that what we did made him comfortable. It's more comfortable if you've been in that theater, if you stood on that spot, if you hung out in the green room and met Biff Henderson and all the crew backstage. And that's what I do for a lot of comedians. I'd have them come and hang out. And Laurie Diamond once said to me, that was very cool. That, I guess Dave knew that I was.
It got noticed.
Yeah, it got noticed that I was really treating the comedians with respect and integrity.
I'll tell you, this is another part of the culture within pants. The idea, there are other ones too. Like, most of y'all can't take a compliment to save your lives, which is so funny because that's right from Dave down. Like, hard to give that man praise. I mean, I've had Steve Young on the show. Trying to give him a compliment is like trying to wrestle a fish. It's just, you can't do it. It just goes.
Deflection.
Oh yeah, they all get deflected, and it just, some of these culture things. And one of the things is, certainly within the writers, but it just seems to be with all of the departments, the willingness to give a helping hand to somebody coming up. Like, Casey talked about how her resume came off the reject pile. Steve Young talked about oh my God, we've had O'Donnell on, and he and I are we're gonna have him on again, and this stuff, and how many of the writers are Kellison, and other
another guy who booked stand-ups before I was booking them.
Oh, there you go. As the segment producer, and then also there you go. And how willing you all are to give each other hands up. I can't tell you how many times people have, even just to use O'Donnell as an example, said Steve O'Donnell plucked me out of obscurity and nothing to help, and just offered that hand. And I've heard so many stories, and this is another example of that. You didn't have to do that, and I don't know if Macaulay did that. I bet you he didn't do that. The fact that you would invite people into the culture to get an understanding of it, because really at the end of the day, it's like, we're, you and I are big hockey fans. It's like going from junior to the pro league. There's an adjustment period that happens. But
also another thing is that, I'm a comedian. I know what it was like, as Buddy Hackett would say, I know what it was like to walk the last 30 steps.
Yes.
To go from backstage to in front of the mic. And if you've never done that, you're at a slight disadvantage of being able to share that with people who have done that.
Yeah.
So I know what it was like. I know what it was like to have that dream to be on the Letterman show. I know what it was like to be on the show, what it was like to walk the last 30 feet, to do that kind of thing. And I was able to help other comics. Kumail Nanjiani, same thing. I saw him as a young comedian. I worked with him very early on, way before he did the show, just because I said, you have what it takes. There's something, you could feel it. You could feel it. There's a certain thing in people you could feel, and it's just a magic. And I knew he had that way before he was ready. And eventually he did the show. And I just got a message from someone who said they were listening to Camille now 1,000 years later talking on the Conan O'Brien podcast about how I had helped him when he was a young kid. And it made me feel good that they remember. It's always nice to hear that the people remember that.
Forgive me for not knowing this off the top of my head now, but it's all kind of blurring together here. And I know you can appreciate that because you've had decades of the show blurring together for you and all that. But so it's happening to me already. Have you had your staff moments yet with Walter?
No, I'm not. It's kind of interesting because being the warm-up, I was more like the crew. So I wasn't in this group or this group. And so, I wasn't like best friends with the other producers or, we were very polite. We worked together. So I don't think they're approaching me for that, which is crazy, but they might run out of people they have.
I don't know.
I will tell you my favorite thing ever on the show was the Fresh Step. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes! Well, what happened was one of the writers had an idea to create a boy band, and out of actors, and they wrote us in, what's his face, Matt Roberts, who's genius, still is a genius.
Gotta have him on.
Wrote this,
yeah,
and he is a great writer and hilarious, and they wrote a song called "Do the Fresh Step," and the way they came up with the name Fresh Step, it was kitty litter that the writer had in his house. And to me, that's one of the greatest things ever on Letterman because, we had it worked out. Their band, of course, didn't exist.
Yeah.
And they even put some of the employees up in the balcony screaming like it was the Beatles, like they knew who the group was to add that effect. So the audience is looking around. We've never heard of them, but obviously they're great because their people are screaming for them. And the next day they had like couple of million hits on this website that it was just such a smart, clever, brilliant, one of the many brilliant moments on on the show.
Well, and right now I'm going to throw it out there. Walter, Don, we've just had two examples of moments that are gold to get onto the official channel there. And we want to deepen that relationship that much more as this thing moves forward. Those are phenomenal moments. I had completely forgotten about that. And it took me a beat, but then I'm like, oh, that's that boy band. That was a really, if YouTube was then what it is now, there's right there the next day, that's a 30 million hit, 40 million hit video. That's that moment that the Jimmys and Colbert and everyone else out there is hoping for as they do their shows every night. That would have been one of them for sure. That was a genius.
There were a million incredible times there, and it's just the way the show handled things. Was always really clever, and as you're doing a live show and some things go wrong. It's not live to tape, but things go wrong, and you solve them, and then the show's over and you can't be in your glory. Like I remember there was a comedian, and I can picture him, and I just his name is not coming, but in my head he's getting huge props. But they needed a comedian that day, and I called him up in the morning and said, we're putting you on tonight. And because we've been working on a set. And so I put him on, and it was a lot of work. It was hard work, and it was making, this guy the day before, didn't know he was going to be on national television.
Yep.
So you got to get him not only the material approved and all of the, there's so many hands it has to go through. Producers, Paul Schaefer had to know when the last words were being said so you can be ready with the music. I mean, there's a million people are involved with this comedian set, and we pulled it off, and it was great, and the comedian was great, and then it's over. The show's over, and you forget about that incredible day, and now it's time to get the next day ready.
That's the whole reason the show exists. That's the whole reason the show exists. You guys would come up with, and again, I've used this analogy so much that it's going to annoy people too, but that's okay. It's a perfect analogy, and I'll come up with another one later to freshen it up. But you would mine. You guys were miners, and every day you would find a diamond, or you'd find a massive gold nugget, or you'd find a depository of whatever it was you were mining. You would find them, and then you would drop them on the ground, forget about them, and move on to mine a new part of the quarry the next day. And every once in a while, you'd come up with something that would become reoccurring and things like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, every day you were mining for new things. The reason this show exists is because those diamonds and that gold, that's valuable shit, and let's pick it up and let's celebrate it again. And that's why we're doing this here, and I'm so grateful that there's such an audience for it, and you guys are all excited about it. That's what we're doing here. You said something about the comedians earlier that really struck a chord with me. It reminds me of something Young told me. It wasn't enough just to be funny for the writer's standpoint. You had to be able to write in Dave's voice, Dave's sensibility, the show's sensibility. And the same thing with comedians. It wasn't a matter of, do they just have a 4-minute hunk that is applicable for national TV? In some ways, or many ways, even though the comedians were so different from each other, like the one that keeps coming to mind is Norm Macdonald. We've talked about him a lot on this show. Right. His stage show, very different from when he shows up on Letterman. I think about when he was on Comedians in Cars getting coffee with Seinfeld, and they had this little moment where Norm was like, you know what, clean is the superior form, it's the harder form, and being able to do both and walk in both worlds. But then there's that X factor, and this is the question I have for you. It's a long way to get to this question. You talked about earlier the idea that comedians would have the sensibility of the show as well, and you're looking for a comedian that matched that sensibility. What were some of the attributes of a comedian that would match the sensibility of Late Show?
And I said it before, smart and silly, I think is the good combo. There was one audition that sticks out in my mind. There was a guy who wanted to be on the show very badly. And I said, you're not in the style of the show. And, I'm sorry about that, but what can I do? And it hurt. It hurt for him. Of course, I understood it. And he wrote me the nastiest letter, the most horrific letter I've ever gotten ever. And instead,
that goes right in your heart, because you're a sensitive motherfucker. You're a sensitive guy. That goes right to your heart.
But you learn. I knew reading the letter that how this guy felt and why he felt the way he did.
Yeah.
And instead of yelling at him or ignoring him, I called him, and I said, I just want you to know that I understand where you're at. I'm not taking this personally. I am forgetting about this letter.
Yep.
And we became, we weren't best friends, but he respected me for, coming to him and letting him know that it wasn't right for the show. I remember there are times when I remember another show where a comedian, the audience went nuts. And I'm watching the set and I'm going, there's nothing in this set that would fit on our show. And knowing how this comedian gets off the stage and the crowd goes wild.
Yeah.
Because it was very pandering, and it was like, hey, how about those old folks, or how, all of that, because pandering is not really a respected trait in stand-up comedy.
No.
Or in life, so this comedian was pandering, and the crowd was like, oh my God. It's like, and I always call it's like cereal box comedy, because it looks pretty on the outside, but there's no nutrition on the inside. There's nothing valuable on the inside.
Great analogy.
And this person was, a human being with feelings, and was successful in the world that person was in. But I just knew that person was not going to get the show, and I knew how disappointed they were, because they probably walked off the stage going, I killed, and I'm going to be on Letterman yesterday or tomorrow. Yeah. So I found the guy, and I said, look, and I talked him down in a way. He wasn't thrilled, but I gave him the respect because he came to do the audition. Mm-hmm. And as a comedian, I respected all the comedians who would come there, unless you were, there. Very, very few people had done things that elicited disrespect on their part, and I don't even know if that's correct English, but they
The
you know,
intention is though. Yeah, we
yeah,
get it.
you know what I mean. You know what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I just had to, it only happened like twice, and I just, moved on from there. With you just have to understand, it's comedians look out for each other all the
Yep.
time. And when I first got the job, I was handed like 15 boxes of VHS tapes, and I watched every one of them. Every one of them.
Wow.
It took me weeks, and I only found 2 comedians in those 15 boxes, full boxes, that would be on the show. It was Nick Griffin and Karen Rontowski. But other than that, those are the only 2 comedians from those boxes. And Nick became a favorite and was on the show all the time.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm working with him soon. I don't know when this is going to air, but he, it's just how it goes. And there's, just because these comics are funny, or I could have made a tape of some of the craziest auditions that there ever were, but out of respect for these comedians, I didn't put them. I didn't put it. I should have. It would have been
the meta
funny.
part would be really cool because it would be entertaining, but a different type of entertaining than they were probably going for, and you got to be careful with that.
I'll tell you one that was funny because I don't remember the person's name or whatever.
Sure.
And this person was in their home, and in their home was also the father and the baby brother, like crawling on his knees, baby brother. And so what had happened was this comedian set up the camera and set up the stage, and it was his living room, and he took sheets and put it over the television and the other furniture there. And he grabbed a brush because he didn't have a microphone, and he was up there, and his father was videotaped. Now, the funny thing about the father is that he was laughing, so the thing would shake every once in a while. And he was smoking while he was doing it. So smoke would be keep coming in the screen. And this guy, he was a brand new comedian, didn't really have, he didn't have it yet. If he he might be a superstar comedian. I don't remember who he was, but, he really, he set this up. But the funniest part was the father, you didn't see him, but you saw his smoke, and the camera would shake, and the kid's holding a brush and talking into the brush. And just like at the right moment, the little baby brother crawls across the screen, drinking his bottle and crawling. And it was so perfect.
Yeah.
But again, it's funny to talk about it because I haven't in a long time, but I didn't really share it with people because I didn't want this kid to ever, if he
didn't want to laugh at them the way that and I get it, but in a sense, if you look at the meta kind of it, it's almost a little Andy Kaufman-ish, like it's almost performance art, like, and that's where it's funny, like, but if you're not going for that or can't accept that that's what it is, then you don't want to highlight that, and that is another interesting line that you had to walk.
And again, it's Dave. Dave would have, how Dave reacted to things that he thought weren't right for the show, and how he reacted to things that were right for the show.
Yeah.
So you get to learn that, and it becomes second nature, and you understand that, and you're not always right. And but you tried, and you played on it up. You try to do everything up to that level. So I didn't want to, as much as it would have been fun to share that video. And I'm sharing the story now, but this is, 30.
Well, and we're not naming names 20, and all that kind of stuff. You're so respectful in how you're doing. And I appreciate that about you. I appreciate how respectful you are. You know what bit it would have fit in the same spirit of on Late Show. I mean, obviously the bit didn't do this. It did it via live performance, but that would have been a perfect, if you guys had a video component to Is This Anything?
Right.
That would have been a perfect kind of spot for that. Is this anything, like, and showing it, and that would have been really, really good.
It would have been that
to show that. You reminded me of another bit too, talking about that comedian who killed. So the way that money comes into our house is I'm a financial guy, a financial advisor guy. I've got a modest little firm here, and I go to conferences, right? And I go to these conferences, and sometimes you get somebody who's on stage, and you hear people in the audience going, "That person is so magnetic. They should be a stand-up." And maybe they have some of the tools that are necessary for it, but the audience, they're telling financial jokes. They're telling, It's kind of what you're talking about there. They're pandering to the crowd. They're doing other techniques that aren't, you got to see past that in a guy in your position. I'll tell you this. I don't know if you were with the show at this point. I think you must have been. I think it was done a couple times where there was a bit on the show where, and I'm just remembering it now for a long time. I don't know if it's even on YouTube anywhere or not, but where they had like scientists or mathematicians come in and tell jokes that kill in their community, but like the punchlines.
I think I was there during.
Were you there for that? That was a
genius
bit, because the punchlines, they would say the punchlines like it was a joke, but nobody would understand the meaning of it.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was there because I watched the show anyway. Sometimes there's a thin line between was I there then, or I know when it's NBC I wasn't there, but I know.
Yeah. Well, this was CBS for sure. I remember being on the Sullivan Theater. Again,
the show started August 30th, and it was 1993, and I started February 17th of 1997.
There are so many of you former staffers that know your dates, like know them to the day. It was a Monday. Right. They know the weather. They know it was it. That's fascinating to me as well. And it just again, one of these little patterns that are emerging as we do this show, and the further we go down the path. We're already an hour. And one of the things that I wanted to do with you, Eddie, was I got to tell you. We've interacted here and there, whatnot, since the first episode. But one of the things is on your Facebook, and I would just right now recommend everybody out there follow Eddie on Facebook and look at his posts, because I just have to say, I appreciate so much. Yeah, it might be a little joke that you throw out there here or there. It might be just a headline joke that people can react to,
a little word
or build
thing
upon.
Right.
Combining bands, I love that one. Fresh DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince and the Revolution. That was the one I posed. I love that. You did Earth. What was yours? Earth, Wind, and Fire. No, what was your?
Yeah, it was Earth, Wind, and no, it was Emerson, Lake, and Fire.
Emerson, Lake, and Fire.
Because I was just looking through online, and Emerson, Lake, and Palmer were like they were doing some tour or something, because these guys have mostly gone from the earth. And I thought, well, if you needed a replacement, who would you get? And I already thought I had a joke years ago at Earth, Wind, and Fire, like fire was sick, so they had sand, Earth, Wind, and Sand, something like that. And that's so long ago. And so the other day I just came up with it, and I said, I didn't know what to call it. So I went combining bands, and then I got like, hundreds of people coming up with stuff. And then
it was so collaborative and so fun to read all of the comments.
And Felicia Collins came on this morning and wrote a couple in there.
Yep, I saw it, and really it was fun. So cool. So you put those up, but then I just have to tell you how much I appreciate, and this, I reached out to you again the other day, say, okay, we got to do this sooner than later, because you put up a hockey story, and I mean, we've alluded to it already in the show here a little bit, but it's the picture of Orr, the iconic picture of Bobby Orr flying through the air like he's fucking Superman after just winning the Stanley Cup, like the scoring that goal, and it's just, oh my God, it's crazy.
Well, what's interesting about that is, like, here I have a story about. It really came out of a story with the Detroit Red Wings, and my friend Dave Strader,
which you told on this show the first time you were on. So this is kind of a continuation.
I don't remember that I did, but I just, Dave was, look, I get, I talk so much anyway. I don't know what I'm talking to someone. You just told that story.
It's great. No, this is perfect, because it's a continuation to get to where we are now. I love it. It's great.
So, the Strader story, and I was just thinking about him. His family is my family, and we became really, really close. And he was a huge Letterman fan, and I brought his whole family to sit at the desk, and it was just such a thrill. And I really miss him a lot, as I miss a lot of my friends. And so the story kept going into that whole realm of then. Well, I did meet the Red Wings on that trip, and then I would work my schedule around them, and I again. Started working with the Rangers, with my team, and then I started the story unfolded by itself of how it was, how all these different relationships I had with hockey players, and the main thing was to show that they're the most down to earth, people. And you and I both, we love hockey, and it's such a small audience, and
comparatively, absolutely. But those of us who get it.
Right. So that was
Yep.
the whole thing. And I had written about 3 years ago a story where I just said you don't like hockey, you marry it. That was what I wrote, and that's all I wrote. And then I found that, and then it reminded me of that story, and then I just pieced them together and
Yeah.
created the story that I do. And I love writing, and I love, you know, you know, I, I the pandemic kind of messed things up for everybody and everything. But
Yeah.
for me, I was trying to get a publisher for my book and my stories. I have 325 stories now that I've written, and people that I respect, like yourself, like like friends of mine that are just famous stars, have called me up and said, "Your stories are amazing. You should write a book." I go, "Well, I need a publisher to be able to do it. And I don't want to self-publish because I don't want to carry the books around
Yeah.
and hey, I'm Eddie. Would you have to go to the airport with 6 cases of books in each comedy club? I
I
just
know all
really
about
like
that.
to
My
be
wife and I wrote a
published. I
book,
don't even
and
need to
yeah.
make money. I
Yeah.
just want it out there. So
Yeah.
they're all a lot of them are on Facebook, and they come out of things that happen during the day or whatever. So you're always I don't have that much room on Facebook, but you can follow.
Yeah.
It would be a Facebook friend because I think I have I'm completely
It
booked up.
limits, yeah, it limits that. But people can follow you and they see those
You
posts
can
because those are
follow,
your
and then you
public
can see all
posts.
the stories. And the
They're
same
so
thing is,
good.
yeah. And then I also love photography, and it's become my new little hobby. And on Instagram, which I'm under Eddie Comic on Instagram, I have a lot of great photos that are both put on Facebook or whatever.
Yep.
Sometimes there's a story attached to it. So if you want to try to become friends there, or even just say hello, please ask questions or come by, or you could do it. So Twitter, I'm Eddie_Brill
Yep.
at Twitter, and there I don't get in political discussions ever. I
Oh,
just
you're the
write
one that doesn't actually
one-liners.
talk about that stuff on Twiter. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah,
Everyone
because
else does.
you can't win. I mean,
No,
whether
you can't.
you
Thank
can't win.
you. Yes.
And why try? Because it's not worth it. Because I
Yep.
don't respect politics anyway.
Yep.
You know. Um. So or most politics I don't respect.
Well, it's the
And so
polarization. Like, why? Like, life is too short. And I mean, I
I'd
appreciate the
rather
fact
you
that you
I'd
and I
rather
both
you
think that
laugh.
way.
I'd rather you laugh than cry.
Exactly.
And if you do
Exactly.
cry, maybe my laughter will help you out of the cry.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing about your stories that I just want to exclamation point a little bit. They're so insightful but delightful at the same time. Like they hit both those nerves where you can tell it's a comic writing it, but it's a comic who has insight and really loves to get into the feelings of things, and I love that as well. It's powerful, but it's also
I appreciate
that
it.
delightful
Yeah,
and funny.
and it's like anything, like with my stand up, you get that you can't help but getting better if you do it every day. And I'm always writing something every day just to get better and better at it. And I look at some old stories and I'll rewrite them
Yeah.
because now my use of the language is a little bit better,
Mhm.
or the story can be more succinct, or there's another part that I remember that I didn't remember the first time when I wrote it, or things that I can attach to it. Because a lot of times, like with the band thing that you were talking about, the band names, I
Yep.
had come up with all those names and I didn't know what to do. So
Yeah.
when I wrote, whatever the title was, it put it all together. The photo in the hockey thing, I didn't choose a photo for that hockey story, but then I was realizing, well, maybe I should put the Detroit Red Wings because that's the biggest part of the story,
Sure.
or put a picture of Dave Strader on there. And then I said, you know what? I'll just go to the most exciting hockey because what's going to lure people in?
Yeah.
Not many people like hockey, so I figured I'd put that picture in, and bring in the best hockey fans, because my friend Vince Moranto in Chicago, he's a huge Blackhawks fan. He said, look, I love your story, but I just I can't get into the Red Wings. So instead of putting pictures of them, I last minute chose the Bobby Orr thing, and I have a couple of Bobby Orr pictures. I don't know where they are right now. There's
Yeah.
probably but people know how much I love Bobby Orr.
Yeah.
And two different people brought me. They met Bobby Orr, and what came out of it was getting Eddie Brill an autograph from Bobby Orr. So I have a few of them.
Yeah.
from people who never met each other or whatever,
Isn't
And
that cool?
So the picture, what I was trying to get to with talking so much, is the photo, or the title of something oftentimes comes last.
Yeah.
That I'll write the story, I'll rewrite the story, I'll tighten it up, and then I'll come up with the title, or the title might already be there in my brain. And then as far as the photos, like when I didn't put photos with my stories, I had less people following. But when
Right.
you put a picture, like I put something about names recently,
Yeah.
on there, and I just found a little photo of the word names. But by putting that, I know I got more followers on that story because people love photos or pictures, or easier. People are not going to just jump into a story
No.
unless there's some kind of other allure.
Good friend, mutual friend of ours, Cece Harrison, when she puts up her writing, she always has a photo on top of it, and it draws you in at first, and then you start reading. And I think that the photo actually, like when you see somebody put a whole bunch of text on social media, whichever platform is your persuasion, I think that there is a connotation that happens. But when there's a photo on top of it that kind of sums up, or at least sets the table a little bit for that following text, it's a completely different connotation. Very, very interesting what you just said, though, how the things evolve and all that. You could overlay all of the descriptors that you just said. Sometimes the title comes last. I rewrite, I do this, I do that. Yeah, you could overlay the evolution of a bit over top of that as well. Isn't it exactly the same damn thing? Like,
Yeah.
how the punchline now becomes sort of the setup, and then it turns into this whole new thing.
Yeah, that's how comedy works. It's mathematics, and oftentimes you come up with a punchline and then you work backwards to write it. Like, I think it's funny that let me see if I can remember the word. It's oh, damn it. It's a shame, because I think it's one of my favorite lines. And
okay,
you can buy anything you want in the store. Oh, the word patronize. Like, patronize is a very interesting word because the word patron's in it.
Yes.
And when you hear patron, you think of someone buying something.
Yes.
Patronize is not a very pleasant term.
Nope.
So I thought of the word patron and patronize, and there's my beginning of the joke. So now I write backwards.
Yes.
So
how do you get to it?
Backwards. So I ended up having some guy who owns a store saying, "Look, you can buy anything you want in my shop. Just don't patronize me."
See.
So that makes the joke. It gives it depth, and that's how the joke came about. But that's how most comedy works. It's like A plus B equals C. Well, what's C? Or A. You find out the punchline is X, and you write back mathematically to create the joke. It's not the only way, but it's a very popular way to come up with a really great joke. Is you come up with the punchline, you know where you want to go,
yeah,
and then work backwards, like the patronize. It took a while, and I do that a lot with wordplay.
Yeah,
it's like there's so many words, like with the word non in front of it, or D something, like, and that's how I wrote this joke a million years ago, and that's a whole other story. But about people being nonchalant is a very mellow way to be. But if you were chalant, you'd be really uptight and nervous and that kind of stuff. So that's how.
This is why you were Dave's guy, by the way, is because that's the exact type of broadcaster he was. The word plays and the different vocabulary and we think about writers out there like Aaron Sorkin, who almost cares about how the word sounds rather than the word itself. He writes it almost like a symphony. He writes that way.
Exactly.
Dave being an auteur, a wordsmith, you having to walk the line of the traditional comedian, but again, looking for those things. I think you're right now really opening up as to why you were the right guy for the job and you lasted so long at it. Eddie, I can't tell you the thrill that I have that we've got a dynamic here, and this is happening more and more, and I can't wait to have you on again. This is a very different episode than the first one. The first one, I was like, holy shit, what's going on? Now we're at a place where we can just shoot the bull and have some fun doing this. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day again. We're an hour and 10 minutes. I want to be very cognizant of your time.
Yeah, because I have a thing I have to do in about 40 minutes. So
okay,
I could talk for hours with you, but we'll separate them, into different things or whatever. So,
well, I appreciate the hell out of you. Hey, Walter, Don, let's get Eddie doing his favorite moments and stuff soon. And let's get some of the moments we talked about here at least out there so people can see them. I love it so much. This has been such a thrill so already, and it's been 4 months. I can't believe it. And we've had so many memories and so much more, as Johnny would say, more to come. I appreciate Eddie Brill so much. Follow him. If he's coming to your local town, do you have any spots? How now the pandemic's open? Are you?
Yeah, September 30th. I'm in St. Pete with Nick Griffin and Caroline Ray.
Okay, this will be out before then for sure. So
that's there, and then usually every birthday in October I get to go to Alameda, California, because there's a comedy club called the Alameda Comedy Club that I helped design. Yeah. And I opened the club the very first weekend, and it happened to be my birthday, and now it's a tradition. This will be the 3rd year in a row, and it's booked, but I might have to change it, but I'm not. And then I just got an offer yesterday that I'm trying to put together, and I don't want to jinx it, but it would be Fiji. It would be Fiji. And I'd be able to go with my son, which is the key because he's a comedian.
I was going to say, would you perform together as well?
Yeah, we're into it. It's just a lot of travel.
Yeah,
for just a couple of days. It's 2 days of shows, 2 days to hang out. Yeah. But just the idea to be able. My son and I are very tight, good friends. He's hilarious, fun to hang out with. I love him. My son.
Yeah.
And so we might. We're trying to work that out today and tomorrow to try to figure out how to pull off this Fiji thing. The only problem is we have to pay for our own flights from New York to LA, which, nowadays the flights are so expensive.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That, we might break even, but then again, we'll be on the beach in Fiji.
It'll be an experience. And yeah, that's beautiful. This has been an experience for me, and I appreciate you so much, Eddie. If Eddie's coming to your town, go see him. If you're a booker, if you're a comedy booker out there, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Just go, at Instagram at Eddie Comic at Instagram. Contact me there. My website, I have an email address from 1 million years ago that you can write to me at, is Eddie Comic, EDDIECOMIC at AOL. I have other ones, but that's the one that I still get a ton of mail at.
Well, Eddie it's vintage. AOL's vintage.
I know, vintage. So yeah, you're welcome to write to me and ask questions, and I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you so much. I'll do a quick outro here and we can say our goodbye privately. That is this is why we do it. Obviously the show's finding its voice like crazy. All these little nuggets that we pick back up again. And there's a guy right there who helped mine for a lot of them. Eddie Brill, once again, hey, listen, I'm going to say this until I don't have to say it anymore. And hopefully that happens sooner than later. If you've watched this program, please, whether you liked it or not, doesn't matter. Like, share, subscribe. Please do all of that stuff. I cannot wait for the day that I don't have to ask you guys to do that anymore. And hopefully it's coming sooner than later. Really appreciate that. We appreciate so much the world of David Letterman and company. That's why we do this show. That has been another episode of the Letterman Podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.